Well, thank you all for coming today. My name's Dave Wilson, and I'm going to spend some time speaking about public speaking. And we labeled this one Inspirational Speaking for Career Success. But really what I'm going to do is just share with you some of the things that I've learned over a career that's put me in front of hundreds of audiences, thousands of talks and speeches, and a whole bunch of keynotes, and just give you some of the things that I learned as we go. Now, I'll share some slides with you, but I think more as I go through these, a little bit to jog my memory and remember some of the things that I experienced to kind of share with you to hopefully give you some tips on being a better public speaker. So a little bit about myself. This says 25 years at National Instruments, and then I woke up and it was about 30 years. And so, but I spent a long career there, and I just learned so much. But I also want to say that it was an amazing environment with a commitment to evangelizing and presenting our instrumentation and our equipment and our solutions. And it afforded me the ability or the opportunity to get out and speak in front of a whole bunch of people. And what I kind of found is that some people really don't like to speak, and there's people like me who just love to speak. And so typically we gravitate toward that role. I spent 36 years in the automated test and measurement industry. And it's kind of funny because I think the lesson here for me was that you can find public speaking opportunities in any field, including scientific measurement and automation. I've done hundreds of keynotes, thousands of presentations, and I've been sort of accused of being irrationally enthusiastic, and I don't know where that comes from, but I am kind of excited about things and sort of happy. What I want to say is that I looked for opportunities to stand in front of stages with 3,000 to 4,000 people, working with students to talk about the things they did. And also something called the Engineering Impact Awards, which is something that I conceived of 25 years ago and spent 20 years actually in front of people speaking about the incredible achievements of scientists and engineers. So I really just love doing that. And that's a little bit about where I was coming from. And so I kind of found that there were different dynamics for public speaking. Sometimes you'll find yourself in a very, very large auditorium with 1,000 people, and that's one dynamic. And then there's another where you might be in a small room with just a few people, maybe even just one or two, and just a couple people, and that's a whole different dynamic. So in that atmosphere, I just thought to make a few comments about that. But I'd like for you to think about either this, but in my case, I found it much more energizing to be in the large groups as well. So there were both of them. So you could define sizes of audiences. And here I was saying, well, small group of people might be just a few to maybe 15 people. Medium, large, you can see the numbers there. And then there's the keynotes. And I'll talk a little bit about the types of keynotes, if I can remember that. But there's different styles of keynotes and kind of some of the preparation that I would do for those. So what's sort of special about a small group? It's like, well, you're probably a lot closer to them. You're physically not that far removed. And I think important for me, you can read the feedback really well. And maybe this is one of the first things I'll offer out as a tip, something to think about, how you read your audience, how you actually tell if they're following you, tracking you, hearing what you're saying, or if they're checking their email, right? So it could be anywhere in between. Usually, once you read them, you're going to want to share more detailed information because you can tell if they're tracking along with you or not. When you're farther away from people, if you're getting really deep, and you can't tell, then typically you'll err on the side of not always going so specific and detailed on things. You'll get more questions. They're probably going to be harder questions. You can ask questions of them, which is also very interesting, and I'll mention why that's kind of good. But the other thing is checking for understanding. Are they tracking you? So I think one of the big pieces of public speaking and presentations, especially if you're trying to get information across and deem this as a successful encounter, is that I almost think of them, even in the big ones, as a conversation. But the communication's a little different. When we're talking to each other, the conversation can be, well, are you understanding? Yes, and questions back and forth. When you're with a bunch of people, you can't get that individual one-on-one communication. And so you're looking for the cues. And I even describe the big presentations as conversations, but my cues would be different. Are people looking at me? Are they paying attention? you can see the sides of people's heads even from far away. And if they're looking someplace else, you can see that. So you get a sense that, yeah, I'm not keeping them. They're not hearing me. The words that I'm saying are now really not being received. And I look for all the cues that that's going on. And if that's happening, I just am sort of wired to be more dynamic, or to tell you, I'm about to tell you something that I really think you ought to hear. You know, that's one of the things that I'll put out there if I'm trying to actually deliver a piece of important information and I'm getting the sense that people aren't with me. So I'll kind of communicate that back and forth. And in a large group, I'll say something like this. So if you're taking notes, and I imagine you're not, but if you are, this is one of the notes that I would take. Meaning, you came, you're sitting here, you're giving me 30 minutes of your time, you're kind of checking out, and I'm trying to tell you, please walk away with this one thing, you know, and I might even say that. I know this might not be the most exciting subject, but I'd like for you to walk away with this one thing. And if you say that, they'll probably listen. All right, well, I'll just tune this one in and I'll get this written down. And there's a good chance they'll walk away with that. So if you get the sense everybody's leaning forward, they're listening to you, they're kind of nodding, then you get a sense, well, all right, I'll work with that and I'll assume it. But if not, then you can actually say, may I have your attention, please, ladies and gentlemen, something very important is about to happen. I'm going to deliver the one thing I think it was worth your time coming to listen to. And I would have fun with that. But there's a little bit of a joke in that, but I would actually use it to try to tune people into an important point. So checking for understanding, you can do that in small groups really well, right? Because you can see it. Oh, he's like, somebody's looking to the right over there. Let me ask you a question. He's like, wait, what? What just happened? And now he's back with you. And you're able to get reconnected with them that way. So just some of the things, and I wanted to make that sort of point about small groups. So let me talk a little bit about what I would say are the 4 secrets. All right, if you're taking notes, here's something I want you to walk away with. And I sort of labeled it PACE, but this preparation, advice, credibility, and engaging. These are the kind of things that I often think about when somebody comes and they're going to actually be listening to me in a presentation. So I'll walk through some of these. First thing I want to show you is I tried to put it into a word that was easy to say that you might actually remember. And if somebody says, what was Dave's talk about? Well, I don't know. He called it PACE though, and maybe you can begin to remember, right? So I'm trying to give you an anchor so that you can walk away remembering some of the important points. And this is a little way to assist in doing something like that. So we'll walk through some of these and I'll talk a little bit about each one of these as we go. So on the preparation side, so getting the material together. And it's kind of interesting because, well, what's the material about? Well, maybe it's about how salts absorb and the density of water in cold temperatures in the North Atlantic Ocean. Ooh, it's like, well, how exciting is that? Depends on your audience, I suppose. But you're thinking about, well, how do I actually sort of put something together? And then here's a big point. Will you walk in and basically deliver the punchline right up front and say, hey, it turns out that you can't absorb salt into cold water in the North Atlantic. Thank you for coming. And you're done, right? But were there more important things actually to prepare and to give under certain conditions that you wanted people to know about? So you kind of have to ask the question, am I just going to walk in and in 4 words give the punchline, or do I need to build up to that? Do I need to actually build up to that message? And some don't like suspense, and it depends on your audience and how you want to do that. And I'll tell you, if I walked in and I knew that, I can't just string people along and try to build this up and then just deliver the punchline, that may not be what I'm determining is the best approach. And you would make a judgment call on that. And if this were the case, I'd say, look, let me tell you something. I'm going to give you the bottom line here, but it's important. I want to tell you how I got to it. I'd be respecting the likelihood that audience just wants to know the answer. But I would probably say, hey, look, I'm going to tell you, or you're going to not like me. But please, I want you to understand that there's some important 3 or 4 steps that got us to that conclusion. And I think it's really important to understand those. And if you do, then I think you'll understand how to use this information going forward. So I would try to build an understanding of the nature of what's about to be delivered. I would do something like that. So having a story, knowledge and information, the analysis, recommendation, and we'll go through some of these pieces. So the story, so what is the story? And I sort of like to start with this. Just assume they don't get it. I've come to the conclusion that things that might just seem so very obvious to you, it's like falling out of bed, obvious. may actually not be. And so how do you know? Like, how are you going to know this? So when you think about the story, if you kind of start there, like, do you get it? Do you understand? Are you like, can I assume it? And I think it's often a mistake to just assume that, yes, you can. You can assume that you can assume it and that everybody knows it and they'll hang with you. And so oftentimes when I look at my most basic presentation and I think to myself, what's this presentation really all about? And is it that easy to understand? Now, we gave a talk in this very room just the other day, and one of the questions was, do you think that it's important for your business, especially if you're in a new business, to generate awareness? I kind of asked this question. And I would think the obvious answer is absolutely. But then the more people I talked to just over time, and when I gave them a chance to really confess that they didn't get that, then I thought, wow, as the communicator, I need to respect that this may not be as obvious as I thought. And so let me take a breath, let me take a step back, and in fact, maybe I'll ask a question. How many people in their businesses actually go and think about what their awareness levels in their marketplaces are? Can I see a show of hands? And I would look at that, and it could be a big audience, it could be a small, and you'd be surprised. You'd be like, wow, that's about 25%. And then I'd try to say to the audience, I'm seeing about 25%. Is that what you want me to believe? Can I see more hands if you just ignored my question? And you see a few more go up and you say, no, it's still about 25%. Okay, let me talk to you about why awareness is important. Let me take a moment there so that we're on the same page. But the point is that it'd be much simpler for me to assume it. I feel good about myself, but think about it. I may have just lost people on my most important first point and gave them the chance. And so this childlike story outline, but just, something, just ask the question. Ask the question of a small group or a large group to calibrate yourself. It's really important. And then the story, does it make sense? Then we'll fill in the detail. Because here's really what I'm trying to say. Once they get, we need awareness so that people know what our name is. And we need a tagline that's better than, let's make the world a better place, albeit that's a great thing. But in what way? Like, what are you going to offer to the marketplace that will make the world a better place? And the tagline might give you a sense of that. And we're going to give you details now on how to make the world a better place by utilizing, appreciating, understanding, and engaging in the product or services that you're offering. Once you're with me, now you understand the importance of the details I'm about to spend the next 20 minutes on. Does that make sense? Okay, so you get the point. And this is one of the things on the story. So you could have an outline, right? And just remember, your story is connecting the dots. That's kind of a big point here. Well, maybe the punchline is, we're not going to meet the deadline. It's like, oh, okay. Do you want to build up to that? Or would you like to just tell me? And maybe if I was in a room full of a bunch of engineers and we had a deadline to meet, I might want to say, hey guys, look, it looks like from my calculations, we're going to have trouble meeting this deadline. However, here's some of the things that we can do to get to this point. So you give some of the details, but then you get into actions, and here's our plan, the next update, and you're going to now, in this case, I gave the information first, but it was important for us that we know it now so that we can make some changes so that we can meet the deadline. And everything I'm about to tell you is, you understand the importance. We got to meet that deadline. We're going to actually go ahead and step through those pieces. But you see, we connected the dots, and maybe the cat's face, that's actually a cat. Can you tell it? Can you connect the dots and see, well, maybe we're seeing that that's going to be the whole cat, but you know that it's a cat, and the cat is, we're not going to meet the deadline unless we do something. Okay, so then the preparation and anticipation. This is something I think about a lot. In fact, I opened up my talk yesterday on this point, and I thought this, wow, these 20, 30 people came from all over the area, and they spent their precious time. They drove around the curvy mountains and hills here, and they got here. What could I tell them that would possibly be worth that time? Like, think about it. If you're going to sit there and say a bunch of stuff that's not clear, not inspirational, not informative, well, then they could walk away and say, man, I just sort of wasted my time. You can ask the question up front to say, what would I tell them that is worth it for them to come here? And I always think about that. What could I tell you? And in fact, I open up, what could I possibly tell you that would be worth your time? And then I would kind of think about the advice I would give. Maybe you could say, what kind of problems are they typically having? Somebody might know, well, this region has this issue or this other issue, and you can get a general grounding of the kind of challenges that an area might have. And guess what? Now you've got a contextual clue as to what might make it worth it for them to come, right? So you can kind of check into something like that. The knowledge, what areas? What are the major takeaways that we're going to give? I'm anticipating what could be a piece of valuable information for this group in the context of what I'm about to deliver. Can I also say this, though? The title of your talk, which is what drew them in the first place, ought to kind of filter and set that expectation. This is called good marketing. It's awareness. Oh, he's going to give a talk. What's he going to give the talk on? Well, it's going to be out the steps of the business process from awareness to consideration to qualification to enablement out to success. And all of these pieces, well, this is what he's going to talk about. Does that interest you? Not really. Maybe you shouldn't come. Very interesting to me. I'll come, and now we've got a connection, and I'm anticipating, especially if I did that preparation and marketing, that this group would be attuned and value knowing that. After all, that's probably why they came. Okay, so the next one is advice. So now you've got the points about what was important, what was interesting, and you're about to offer up advice to them. And what advice would you give? And here's a couple things. I've sort of found that every day I'm a little older than everyone else on the planet. It's just like this rule that I had to wake up and understand. Wow, there's nobody on the planet right now that's older, more people who are older than I am than yesterday. I'm progressing towards this end, so I'm accruing information and knowledge and experience. And understand that there are people just coming into your field, into your business, into your areas of expertise, who by definition don't have as much time on the planet as you do. And so you're probably accruing information, and you're going to offer them some piece of advice. So you look for the kind of things that are general in a way that people can say, wow, yeah, I can believe that. I can understand that and get it. However, you're going to put it in the context of the likely struggles and problems that they're having. So I just showed one. This was always interesting to me. It's like, what most people think, you either win or you lose. But that's not really the way life works. I mean, maybe on an event-by-event basis. But events accrue experience. And so basically, instead of thinking of those as failures, those events are opportunities to learn. And I'm telling you, once you get comfortable with the fact that nothing ever really works out the way you think all the time, and that they're not failures, but you learn from it, then you wake up one day with a vast amount of information that you can kind of scratch your head. And when the next opportunity comes along, you say, wow, I've seen this before. I think I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try it this way because I've got enough experience to see that doesn't work out. My point is that would be a piece of advice. And then once I deliver something we all can agree on that's probably true, now I'm going to tell you and give you specific examples and stories and experiences I had related to why you came to see me in the first place. But I'm thinking about the advice, I'm thinking about the context at which I can get people to accept my advice, and then I'm thinking about what the actual subject would be of that advice. Okay? And then we get to C in PACE, and this is credibility. And I want to tell you, I love this one. If you're going to get up in front of a bunch of people, then know your stuff. Know something about, and you don't have to know everything about the field, but you should have one element that's centered in a piece of advice you would give, that's surrounded by a bunch of experiences where you failed a bunch of times and then found solutions to it that did work. And you're going to give them that information. Well, how do I know that what you're about to tell me true is steeped in any kind of authenticity, credibility, believability, realism, these things? How am I going to know? It's like, well, okay, so let's look back at what you learned and why you believe what you do believe. And that's called data, right? Data and visuals and these types of things. And so, this one right here is from Thomas Alva Edison. That's what TAE means. And he had a notebook. And he wrote down all the things that are to be done and things that I'm doing. It actually says things doing and to be done. And you go and you look down his list. It's like a cotton picker, a standard phonograph, a hearing apparatus, an electric piano. Like, how about a mirror that moves by itself, and all these different things. The light bulb's probably in there somewhere. And you know what? He listed these things, and the amazing thing about it is that he did almost all of them. And every one of them would have changed our life in some way, shape, or form. How did he know he was going to get there? Well, he wasn't afraid to fail. He made 1,000 light bulbs. I made that number up. I don't know what it was. He made a lot of light bulbs, and most of them didn't work. But in the end, he found one with tungsten and a vacuum, and it worked. And it shed a lot of light, changed our lives. But he had an understanding on how he was going to do it, and he gained his credibility through experience and experimentation, and he could make confident, bold claims about what he was going to be able to do. And that to me was just wonderful. His experience gave him the confidence. Okay, so then the kind of data, right? Data in your on top of your focus areas, and I kind of always say this. In fact, I interview this way. It's like, give me some data that backs up this point. You made a claim. It's like, how do you know that? It's like, well, I looked it up from this source, and I've studied this, and like, that's great. That's great. Give me another one. And now he gets like, and then there's a little bit of this that happens. It's like, all right, I'm going to try to figure out what the next piece of data would be. And then maybe they have a piece of data and they give it to you. And that's good. And you're like, all right, one more. Give me one more. Now you're there. Is it real? Like, did they just make a general claim? It's like, it's good to be nice. It's fail forward, How many times have you failed? Give me the examples of what you failed. How bad was the failure? What did it cost you to fail? What were these things? What were the big takeaways? All right, give me another failure. And if you're going through model after model, you designed and printed and it didn't work, and you redesigned and printed and it didn't work, and you redesigned and printed, and you can give me details, I'm like, wow, you've actually tried this, haven't you? Yeah, I tried it a lot. And I failed a bunch of times. And now I really know that this thermal model doesn't work. I have to have a way to have a heat escape. I put vents in, and everything's fine from here on out. It's like, well, I believe you. Because you can give me the details in the stories that give the credibility to the claims you are making. And here we go. So if you're going to have graphics, make them simple and clear. And then I put a graphic up here that I am not sure is clear or simple at all. Okay, having said that, maybe that was just an example of how to make it not simple and clear. But think about the simple things connecting the dots that would make the point that you want. So that I don't sit there and study the pelagic zone, whatever that is, instead of listening to the points that the speaker's trying to make. Okay, and then drawing conclusions. So therefore, have good thermal characteristics on your design so that your power components don't overheat. Therefore, right? And think about your therefores. I love this word. This, and this, and I claim that, and do this, and this. Therefore, your design will survive in the field. It's got to be leading somewhere, and where's it leading? What is your therefore? Okay, the obvious questions. What is that? And look, when you put something like this and that maybe it's not clear, you're hoping this is a fishing expedition that people won't quite understand, and they'll ask you for clarification. Sometimes in your presentation, you do things like you look at people, you see if they're following, they're tracking, they're nodding, or you put a piece of data up like this and you see if you get any questions, especially in a smaller group. Somebody should question this, right? And if they do, and you can explain it, now you know you're communicating. So this would, in my mind, this is just a checkpoint. Okay, these types of things. So targets versus actuals. I wanted to make a point, and this is kind of an interesting one from a business process standpoint. And you can have targets and goals in your presentations. I always think of my presentations like, where should this lead? What do I want them to walk away with? And in our talk yesterday, I said, I want people to walk away with understanding that awareness is important. If you're a new company, they need to know your name. You need to associate with what your service or offering is so people don't have to guess about that. And I've got a goal to get them to achieve that. It's like, well, what's your goal? That everyone in the audience? You're like, yeah, 100%. All right, well, maybe 90%. So you'd set some kind of target for your presentation, what your goals, and then what the actuals would be. So you'd have some kind of number that says, here's my targets, here's my actuals, and always be comparing to what your goal is, even in a presentation. Okay, so I want to get to this end of it, which is about inspiration and where it comes from and how important it is when you're communicating to someone. And I sort of feel like inspiration So belief is truth held in the mind. Faith is a fire in the heart. And this, I have to say, I work with Devisoft and I feel this fire in the heart that these products are excellent and that they help people and that the world is better off because they use them. I think you can talk to everyone around here and get that sense. And so when you're up in front of people and they're talking to you about their measurement issues and the things that they need to store and what's riding on the data and how important that data is, you'll get a sense of confidence and belief that this faith in the product, we're going to deliver that for you. And so now when you're in front of people and you're speaking to them, what's your tone? What messages are you sending out? And I love to be involved with the products that I believe in, that I have a faith in. And so when people are talking to me, this is where it gets exciting. If the people in my field, they need to do the kind of things that our products or services are offering, I want to feel it right here that we're going to be able to deliver for you. And for me, there's an energy around saying yes and knowing that it's going to be true and it's actually going to happen. When you feel that and you believe it, I believe you can't help but deliver that confidence. And most importantly, in my mind, it's not just to convince you to do something. It might be to convince you to do something and have it turn out to be real. Have it actually materialize in a success. Because to me, that's the full circle. And that's where my faith comes from, that circle got complete, the success got realized, and we actually get this answer that I was so excited to tell you about in the first place. Why was I excited? Because I've seen it happen, the successes time and time again. That credibility is built in my observations and experiences of success. Okay, so then engaging. Are you engaging with people? And these are fun pictures, I like this one down here on the left because this is a print of this chocolate piece that was made for her, and that's her in chocolate. And it's kind of a conflict. It's like, wow, that's me. I could eat that, but that's me. It's like, but I have fun with this in that if you can have a little levity that people could look at that and we'd all agree. It's like, yeah, that's fun. That's weird. That's fun. Have fun with it. But now we're connecting on a point that we all agree to. And therefore, we're engaged in a common feeling about something. And therefore, when we get to the feelings of the topic that we're going to work on, we're likely to be more engaged. So I use humor a little bit. I have a lot of, by definition, fun with it. But in a sense, it's to see if we can bond on anything. Can we actually connect? Do we have the ability to connect here? And if we do, then also we probably have the ability to connect on something I have faith in, which I'm about to present to you. Right? So inspirational speaking. So do you believe? Are you amazed by it? Do you honestly believe when your customers engage, they will be better off for it? Like, do you believe that or not? And if not, then I would say, then go find it. Go find the examples and the case studies and the successes where you believe it. Are you credible? Have you done your homework? Do you have the data 3 layers deep to actually say, yes, I'm going to make this work? Are you confident? Do you have the confidence in this? Captivating, entertaining, and relevant. So on the entertaining thing, I want to say this. Not everybody's an entertainer. Do they want to entertain? And I get that. But on the other hand, think of it this way. Why do you watch a movie? Like, are you entertained? It sort of keeps you in. And with all the action and all these things, oftentimes there's some kind of moral to this story. There's some kind of benefit, something you gain by going through that experience, but they keep you engaged with the stories, which are critically important, the experiences that you have, the confidence and the faith that you can generate in the outcome. And then this other one I really like. Are you relevant? Do you, with what you're presenting, relate to what their needs are? I'm going to go back to the very beginning. When you put out a title of a speech or a talk you're about to give, make sure that that's a relevant, clear title, or at least you're going fishing so that when they come, they'll be relevant to this. Okay, the authenticity, the presence, and I'm going to go ahead and start winding down. I got a lot more slides that I could go through. But basically, I want to say being authentic stems from the credibility. Having presence and actually the engaging part comes from the faith that you have in the product and that people will be better off using it. So if we go back through PACE, right, we're having preparation, right? We go through that particular piece. All of these other ones are things that, I'm talking about But it's really important for you to understand that this is a communication between you and a group of people and what they're actually going to do to be more engaged and more informed when you're done. So presenting and the mechanics, the last thing I'll say, and I'll kind of wind up with this, on presenting and the mechanics and the pieces of this, you want to have your story lined up. You want to have a clear communication that goes out to invite people in. You want to have an empathy for what their problems might be, some kind of clue in a context where it would come in. You want to have credibility of data so that they believe, and you believe, that what you're about to say can actually work. You want to be engaging so they stay with you. And in the end, you want to be authentic and give the kind of confidence and advice that you really believe is going to change the way they think, what their opportunities are, and the experiences that they have. So let's go ahead and end here. I think we're right at our time, but I'd like to thank you for sticking with us through this PACE set of elements and pieces. And I would invite you to think about when you go to present next as it's an opportunity. You don't have to get it perfectly right, but it's an opportunity for you to begin to build communication with people that will actually both improve them and improve you and your ability to connect with them. So here we get to somebody that you'd probably recognize, and he's got a great presence and a lot of confidence, and he pretty much, as a character, believes in the things he does, all the things that he does. But I want to give you a sense of how you approach something and the mechanics and how they can make a difference in a presentation. So one of the things, and since I traveled around a lot, I would go to many places, and if I would walk out on a stage and they'd hand me a microphone and everybody's kind of talking and mumbling, and I have to say, "Oh, hello everyone, can I have your attention please?" Try to get them to pay attention to me. Then it seems like I'm not all that important to talk to them, right? I'm the one who has to, I'll say beg, but I have to ask for their attention and do that kind of housekeeping. And that sets the wrong tone as to what my role is. My role is to generate interest or to deliver information or tell you something that hopefully I think you need to know. And if my role comes out to be to ask you for the permission to do that, then it puts me mentally in the wrong role that I have in my interaction with the audience. So instead, many places do this and some don't, but I would ask for someone every time to introduce me. And the reason for that is people are enjoying their company with other people, but they need somebody with authority, usually who's hosting the event, to come in and ask for their attention and get everybody to calm down. It's just a courtesy to them, and they quiet down and then give you that introduction. And in my mind, the introduction is important. It gives you the credibility, the authenticity, but it also sets this buffer of attention focus for you to come out and begin to communicate. And so that first one, have someone introduce you, is doing a lot in my mind. But I wanted to share that with you because I think, especially in your early presentations, this can get lost and it has an effect. I say dress equal or slightly up, right? So if I was going to a place where everybody wore a polo shirt, I'd wear a button down. If everybody wore a button down, I'd wear a tie and my button down. If everybody wore a tie, I'd wear a jacket over my shirt and tie, right? So if everybody's wearing a t-shirt, then I'd wear my polo. And you're looking to say, hey, I came, I respect this opportunity, I have something important to tell you, and I want to just elevate that difference, the knowledge I have versus what you may not have yet. And I do it visually, and I do that through this little tip, of dressing up slightly. I stand up if I possibly can. Even if I'm at a table and there's a bunch of people around, especially if I've got some points to make, if I have slides, I'll almost always stand up. I'll almost always do that because I'm trying to get my points across, and people tend to listen to you more if you're standing up versus if you're sitting down. So I just give you this because if you took the time to actually go and prepare and present something, then you can command a little bit more attention and a little more consideration for what you're about to deliver, I believe, if you stand up. Here's a big one. Speak clearly and loud enough. I can't tell you how many times people have come in and it was important, and I couldn't hear them. Or they're saying something and this important word is gonna come in, it's like, do more of this or less of this. And it's like, and I can't tell you how important it is to do of this. It's like, did he say more or less? I came to find out and I don't know. So if you're delivering this thing and you're telling something, yes, do more of that, do less of this, don't do that, definitely do this, you can't lose the most important word in the middle of the sentence because they didn't hear you. And I'm telling you this because I've just seen it a lot of times. So they'll hold the microphone. This is not a microphone. This is a microphone. This is not. However, if I wanted to say the point, I wouldn't hold the microphone down here. It's like, well, it's very important that you do more of that. It's like, no, nobody's going to hear that. Those words, you want to get right here. You want to speak it and make sure that they got the point, right? Look at the group, not at the slides. Sometimes I look at the slides, but look at the group to make your points mostly. Primarily in my mind, so you can see if they're following you. I have seen people give the presentation like this the whole time. And you know, if you look at this and it's important and do more of that and don't do this, you have no idea whether they're following you. They could be off someplace else and everybody's wasting their time. I look at the group. If it's dismissive, then be right. Well, I don't even remember what that means. That was an old point. We're just going to move past that one. Okay, the speaking, the type of conversation. Is it stimulus response? The words out, the body language back, these types of things. You send out words to somebody. Are they responding with interest, with nodding? That's the body language, and that's the conversation. I'm telling you, the tip here is understand your presentation is really a conversation, and it's in the forms of me sending out words and them sending back signals in the forms of their body language. I have already mentioned the quick intro and the credentials. I think you understand why that is. The complete sentences and thoughts. So let me say this. I'm bad at this, and in fact, I think I just did it. When you're speaking to somebody, finish the thought. I want you all to be aware that this measurement product is some of the finest, highest resolution products on the market. That was a whole sentence, but I finished it at least. So when you're trying to make a point, understand if you interrupt yourself in the middle and change direction and thought, it's like making a quick left-hand turn. Some will stay with you and about 20% won't. And so you're losing people when you do this, right? And so understand complete sentences and thoughts when you're trying to make a point. Practice at least the sentences that open up, make the point, and close. Now the filler words. This is something people focus on. And I'm not sure how many filler words I may have generated. There were a few I think I threw out there. But most of my talks began in the early years with you know, like, and all the filler words to put in between all the things that I was about to say. And it's really hard to get rid of those. It's really hard to get rid of those. But it comes over time. So my advice on this particular point is, yeah, live with them a little bit. But have an intent to remove them. And if you can't think of the word, you're going to be wired to maybe say a filler word. And then start by just not doing it. And it's going to be weird because you're going to get these little blanks in there. You'll be going along and saying something like, well, if I really think about it, it's important to study the material before I go, right? So you get these little blanks, but the little blanks in my mind are the bridges that you can begin to shorten. But if you load those blanks with the filler words, you'll never get rid of them. And it can take years. So don't be too worried about them, but have an intent and a little bit of practice where you'll replace them even with silence and then begin to close the gaps on the silence. So I just want to say that. So I want to say something about humor. And I've said this before, but it's worth repeating. Humor is part of the conversation. I almost never tell a canned joke, although I did the other day. But things just occur to me in the context of what the audience is doing or somebody said. And it'll occur to me and I'll throw it out. And I'll look to see if I even get a smile. Now, if I get a smile or if I get a laugh, what that tells me is I said something funny. That's great. But we just communicated. I threw out words and I got a response back. And importantly, that tells me that I have a rapport with this audience and we can communicate to one another. And when I send out the important information, I know they have the ability to either confirm or reject that information. But now I know at least we can talk. And this is an important point. And I'll use humor sometimes. God, things just amaze me, and sometimes I guess they're funny. But it's a way also that I check to see if there's an open communication channel between me and the group that I'm speaking to. Okay? And then the speaking. Speaking with dynamics. You know, there's the monotone piece, and it's an important point. And just understand, if you're going to be kind of speaking softly and you're never raising your dynamics a little louder, a little quieter, if it's sort of like nothing's amazing. Nothing really matters. Everything is equal. And I think the mind begins to say, well, everything's equal. I don't know if that was important or this was important. I'm just not sure. The dynamics say, well, you know, one of the things I really want you to be sure of, and if you throw that out, people are like, oh, I guess I probably need to pay attention to this one. So the dynamics are a tool, right? And if you're typically quiet, but you got to the point where this is the important information, then practice how you could step it up a level in energy in order to give them the understanding that this was important. So let me talk about repeat the question. This is an important one. Sometimes you get a question on stage. Could be a few people, could be a lot of people, and they'll ask you a question. And your first thought is, I have no idea. I simply do not know. The first thing I do in this case is I give myself a second and I'll repeat the question. You could ask for have it repeated, but I'll repeat to check for understanding, because sometimes speaking it back yourself opens up another neural circuit that you can tap into some information that might remind you, oh yeah, I know a little bit about that. Now, it could be that no doors opened. There were no pathways that gave you any information about that. And so, well, nice try, but you gave yourself a chance. And that was sort of one of the points. So you're repeating the question, gives you time to process the point. And then one of the things I want to say in this is the next point related to repeating the question. What you might want to do is reinforce the point they made, but think about things that are related to the question they ask. It may not be exactly the answer to the question. This may come up in one of my other slides, but the thing I'm really trying to say is I may not know the answer to that specific question, but I have a set of experiences that seem to be related. And so I would often answer a question I didn't know the answer to like this. I'd repeat the question and I'd say, that's a good question, and that's code for meaning I really don't know. And then I would probably say, but you know, this reminds me of the time when I was trying to do closed loop control on this roll chassis dynamometer. And they asked me if I could control something at 10 millisecond intervals. They asked me that question. That's a real question I got. And I didn't know. I'd never done it with my setup. I said, you know, I don't know. However, I do know that in this other controls case, I was getting about 20 milliseconds update rate on this servo hydraulic actuator. And that's what I know with this setup. We've got faster computers now, so it's a good chance that would work, but we would have to try it. What I've just told you is, I'm not sure. I've got a relevant experience. This is something that we can try out before we make the promise. And I think everybody can accept that as a reasonable response, getting in the zone of information, okay? And keep your anecdotal story short, just like the anecdote I just gave you. I'm not sure that was short, but that's an example of an anecdote, okay? And this was my real point on not knowing the answer. Repeating for clarity, admit you don't know, compare to something you do, right? This was the point. You can recruit help and follow up. And I want to say this, especially in a smaller group. Sometimes you might get one person who's asking a bunch of hard questions and they know a lot about it and they're just hitting you with stuff. And you begin to realize, wow, you know, there's some things I don't exactly know about all this, but that guy sure seems to know a lot about it. And so sometimes, especially if I've gotten a sense for this person and I'm getting a lot of questions, say, you know, I really don't know. That's a good one. You've had some really important points. Do you have a comment on that? And I might actually hand it over to them for You pick a short number of seconds. Can you quickly give us your thoughts on this? And they might give you an answer. It engages them. It actually satisfies what the customer was there for, was to get the information, and you can recruit help, is kind of what I'm saying. And sometimes I've done that. And then, of course, if you don't know the answer, you've been in a general area, if you can follow up, that would be awesome. You can follow up on it later. So the other thing I'll say is this: inspire yourself. Inspire yourself with the products. Inspire yourself with the subject matter. Inspire yourself with the service. And what I really think is, if you're trying to convince somebody to use something and try something, it's critically important to believe it yourself first, right? Draw from your experiences. You're not going to know the answer to every question, but my guess is, as you've tried and failed and had experiences throughout your life, you're going to have accrued information and experiences that are at least relevant. And in my experience, saying that I'm not sure on that specific case. However, I saw this and here's how it worked out. And if you've got details, it's great. So you throw some details out there and at least give them a relative sense of what's possible, right? Improve yourself. Keep trying. Like I said, the filler words, you can just replace them with silence. That's a little awkward, I know, but begin to reduce them. That happens over time. And if you really want to be a public speaker, then speak publicly. And do that several times, as you can. Just get in front of people, think about the dynamics, ask your friends how you did. You could do that. Think about the different angles. Think about the ways that people might appreciate or understand or relate to what you're saying. And sometimes your anecdotes could take those angles and they might understand it better. Inspire around the realities, but I'll also say this: be inspired by the possibilities of the technologies or the services that you're putting out. And to me, I think that's where the energy comes from. What are the possibilities? What could be done? How could we improve people? And in a sense, that's one of the reasons to get out of bed every day, is that possibilities exist and things can be made better. So the final thoughts: think about all the elements we talked about, all of this preparation, all of this stuff about credibility, all this stuff about an engagement and inspiration and enablement, all of these elements and pieces that really can make you an important part of somebody's day. And if the information is really credible, relevant, authentic, and delivered in a way that inspired them, it could influence and impact them for long periods of time. But I will say, many of those inspirational possibilities are imparted when you're in the middle of a group and you're giving a public presentation. So I hope this was informative, and we'll see you again. Thanks.